Hello, Canada, and welcome to another episode of the Maple Pill. As always, I'm your host, Matt McKeever. And before we jump into today's show, I just want to say, first of all, really thanks to everyone that's been sharing our trucker video special on the Freedom Convoy that's going on here in Canada. I think I've got 5,000 views on Facebook, over 1,500 views on YouTube. And that's really just because of you guys that are actually watching this, because we both know the algorithm's going to do me no favors. So again, really appreciate that from you guys. If you are enjoying the show, I encourage you to subscribe, smash the like button, all that good stuff. And before we jump into it, a reminder, as always, links to everything we're going to be talking about is in the video description down below, because I really want this show to not be your only source of information. I just want this to be the springboard where you jump into, or go down the rabbit hole and really start making decisions and informed decisions for yourselves, despite what mainstream media and the politicians may prefer you to do. So we're going to do a slightly different episode than normal tonight. I'm going to focus half the episode on just updating you guys on what's going on with the trucker convoy, because there's a lot of developments occurring. There's still a decent amount of false narratives, misinformation, and obfuscation coming from mainstream media, which is really frustrating. Trudeau still being a dick. I guess that shouldn't be surprising to us, but it is a little frustrating. And then in the second half of the show, I'll quickly run you through a couple blue pill, red pill, black pill, clown pill, and then finally some white pill stories. But again, we're primarily going to focus on the truckers tonight, just because, one, it's one of the few bright spots I feel like right now during this entire COVID lockdown, all the craziness. It really has been just invigorating to see Canadians standing up, speaking out, supporting each other, despite, mainstream media trying to really just frame all of us as crazy lunatics that are, racist, essentially. That seems to be their go-to narrative. And a quick reminder, if you guys want to really jump into the trucker discussion, if you've got no idea what I'm talking about, the first link in the video description down below is to Tuesday's episode, where we spent an hour just talking about the trucker convoy. So again, really encourage you guys to get informed, because I've heard from so many people when they're talking to their friends or family, they've got no idea of what's actually going on. They've only heard one little headline, or they've only heard one little, quote from Trudeau in regards to what this is actually about, which is really, it's just unfortunate in this day and age, let's be honest. But first things first, I need to get my headphones on, and let's jump into it. So speaking of the truckers and everything going on here, I wanted to share this video, and this is a quote from last night from Mr. Justin Trudeau, and he's up to his usual tricks.
The small fringe minority of people who are on their way to Ottawa, or who are holding unacceptable views that they're expressing, do not represent the views of Canadians who have been there for each other, who know that following the science and stepping up to protect each other is the best way to continue to ensure our freedoms, our rights, our values as a country.
Next question.
So again, he's always very careful with his words, where he says the fringe minority, and he kind of leaves it up to interpretation whether he's painting everyone in this movement with that brush, or whether he means a fringe minority within the movement. Now, the way that you'll see most mainstream media reporting on this, they run with it that essentially the entire movement is this fringe minority of Canadians, rather than simply a fringe minority within the movement is potentially as he describes them. But I'm also really curious, in this day and age, what exactly does Justin Trudeau mean when he says they've got unacceptable views or unacceptable opinions? And I think that it would be nice for him to really spell that out. Because if the unacceptable opinion is simply bodily autonomy, the right to choose whether you want to get a COVID vaccine, whether you've got the right to make your own medical decisions, that's a big issue. And the fact that he's willing to just brush with such a broad brush on the subject matter is really frustrating. And speaking of frustrating, we highlighted this on Tuesday's show, but I didn't actually play the video for you. So here's Aaron O'Toole essentially dodging every question possible in regards to what's going on with the truckers, because he dare not want to go against the mainstream media. And essentially he's so focused on just being, I think, Trudeau's shadow at this point in time that he'd hate to have an original opinion of his own.
Several of your MPs have tweeted out support for the convoy. One of them saying that he felt the Prime Minister had a vendetta against people who were unvaccinated. Do you support the convoy? its goals, its objectives, even though the Canadian Trucking Alliance says it could be disruptive, and to follow, again, repeat Louis' question, will you meet with them when they come to Ottawa?
We've been talking to the Canadian Truckers Alliance, Glenn, for several months. We've seen a crisis in the supply chain coming for several months, and we've proposed policies to try and help alleviate that. The most important of which is vaccines.
You didn't answer my question about
yes, I did, Glenn.
You didn't say
vaccines
whether you
are a critical tool.
You didn't say whether you meet with them.
And we need
you didn't say what,
to make sure we keep store shelves full.
Maybe you can answer in response to my next question, sir. You can say whether you meet with them.
That's why last week, Glenn,
my follow-up question is about the supply chain. One of your MPs tweeted out a photograph purporting to be empty grocery store shelves in Canada. Turns out was actually from the UK several years ago. When things like that happen, does that undermine your party's credibility on this issue?
Well, we've been talking about shortages for some time. So has the Canadian Chamber of Commerce.
There are unvaccinated truckers rolling into Ottawa. You won't say whether you support them. You won't say whether you will meet with them. So what should Canadians think about your position? Do you not support the trucking convoy?
I support getting as many people vaccinated as possible.
Okay, my blood pressure is going to go through the roof if we continue to listen to this. But honestly, in this day and age, just be authentic, be truthful rather than trying to be political. Like, this drives me fucking crazy, and it's embarrassing to the Conservative Party of Canada. And Aaron O'Toole, again, should be absolutely embarrassed about his entire approach to this. Honestly, I'd much rather him take a hard line like Justin Trudeau and at least stand behind something rather than simply trying to stand behind Trudeau's shadow in the hopes that, I guess he doesn't get any sort of flack. And then just wanted to highlight this from True North. Again, link in the video description down below. But O'Toole calls for study, truck stop vaccine clinics, and educational programs for truckers. So again, at this point in time, it's very obvious. He doesn't give a shit about you, your personal freedoms. He doesn't give a shit about really what's even going on with the mandates and lockdowns. He literally is just hoping to keep his job. Like, okay, Boomer, we're done with you. Let's move on at this point in time. It's time really for Pierre Poilievre just to step in and become the leader of the CPC, because I don't know. You guys let me know. Do you think that I'm being too hard on Aaron O'Toole? And do you think that Justin Trudeau actually has a vendetta against the unvaxxed? And follow-up question, if you don't think he's got a vendetta, please cite some sources, because all the quotes, all the snippets that I hear these days, it certainly sounds like he's framing that the unvaccinated are the other. They're the enemy. They're a fringe minority. When in fact, I actually believe they're just your fellow citizens. But let's hear what Pierre Poilievre had in regards to what's going on right now, because he's the voice of reason.
Think of the extreme elements trying to latch onto the truck convoy even for this.
Well, what I think is interesting is that when there's a left-wing protest on Parliament Hill, we don't see the Liberal media going through every single name of the people who attends to try and find one person that they can disparage the whole group with. We don't see CBC, for example, has been accused by its own employees of systemic racism. And yet we don't see the media here generalize that everyone who works at the CBC is a racist. Whenever you have 5,000 or 10,000 people who are part of any group, you're bound to have a number who have or say unacceptable things. And they should be individually responsible for the things they say and do. But that doesn't mean we disparage the thousands of hardworking, law-abiding, and peaceful truckers who, quite frankly, have kept all of you alive the last 2 years by filling your grocery shelves with the food that you eat and filling your homes with the products that you rely upon. So I think that it is possible to hold individually responsible anyone who says or does anything unacceptable, while showing support for the hardworking, law-abiding, peace-loving truckers who are fighting for their freedom and their livelihoods, and on whom we have depended for our very existence over the last 2 years.
Imagine that, saying that people should be individually responsible for their actions. What a reasonable thing. And, compare that to the divisiveness that Trudeau constantly focuses on. At this point in time, in my opinion, it's very obvious that Trudeau believes that anyone that disagrees with him, regardless of the subject matter, is the enemy, that they are inherently wrong, that they inherently have to be racist, that they have to be stupid, that, they're the unwashed, filthy plebs or masses. And I really appreciate Pierre's very reasonable stance here. And it shouldn't be controversial to think that people should be individually held responsible for their actions. It literally should not be, we shouldn't even be having this freaking discussion. But I wanted to highlight one tweet from him as well. So, when was the last time the press gallery went through the social media posts of every single person attending a left-wing protest to find and report every crazy comment made? Yeah, it's a very reasonable thing to ask, because as I showed you on Tuesday night, when we're going through like the global news article, when they're trying to cherry pick to find the most extreme, sources and comments they can find, one, they're very watered down, and, quoting things like fucking A isn't really that extreme. But secondly, even if there were extremists as part of this movement, that doesn't just immediately make the entire movement worthless or mean that everyone else agrees with that extreme minority as part of the movement. And again, the same thing holds true on left-wing protests, right? If someone was protesting, like, let's be honest, at this point in time, David Suzuki has said crazier shit than what I'm hearing from any of these truckers. And yet no one's, demanding that David Suzuki be stopped. In fact, like, it seems like a nothing burger whenever he says some of his crazy shit about oil pipelines. Continuing on, speaking about, kind of the coward that Justin Trudeau is, he recently, as of today, announced that, well, I'll just let the Reuters article do it. Canada's Trudeau is in isolation after COVID exposure is test negative. So again, literally, I thought we were supposed to be following the science, but he's going to miss out on the first day of Parliament reopening, as well as miss this entire, trucker convoy for freedom. And all of it because he was potentially exposed to someone that had COVID, even though his test came back negative. And direct quote here from the article, Ottawa, January 27th, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said on Thursday he had gone into isolation for 5 days after being exposed to someone with COVID-19, adding a rapid test result had come back negative. I feel fine and will be working from home. Stay safe, everyone, and please get vaccinated, Trudeau tweeted. The news means Trudeau, who's 50, will miss the reopening of Parliament next Monday. Trudeau, Prime Minister since 2015, was reelected for a second time last September. So again, Parliament's opening up on Monday and he's going to miss it. But even more important is the fact that he's going to be missing in action during this protest. And I shouldn't be surprised at this point in time, but like, I literally thought they'd at least, go a little bit further and like buy a positive test or something like that, or fake it, right? Like the kids that, when they're trying to get out of school because they're sick, and, the thermometer and like putting it on the radiator or whatever, a la Ferris Bueller. But again, he cares so little that he's not even trying at this point in time. Although it was nice to see Elon Musk give a shout out. So Canadian truckers rule. And I actually wanted to highlight this second tweet from Elon that hasn't been nearly getting the same sort of attention. And that is, CB radios are free from government media control. And whenever someone's going to point out the fact that, there's methods or means for us to communicate without being directly under the government control, I think there's a lot you potentially could read into this message. But again, I appreciate seeing him support what's going on. And he wasn't alone as far as like major celebrities that were endorsing or promoting what was going on. So here's a quick clip from a recent Joe Rogan episode.
He's in revolt. Do you know about this? Well, show this video. Look at this video that I sent Jamie.
This is huge. Look at my go forever. This is by Atchison outside of Edmonton, heading to Calgary, January 23rd.
It's a giant convoy of trucks that's apparently some insane amount of people, like 50,000 trucks that are headed to Ottawa to protest the vaccine mandates by Trudeau.
And so, again, there's a lot of different numbers being thrown around. As far as whether it is 50,000 trucks or less than that or more than that, I think only time will tell at this point in time. But later on, I'm going to show you something that is very apparent to me, that the mainstream media, that even the Ottawa Police Service is trying to downplay this as much as possible. And I don't know. It's hard for me to not ascribe a motive to it at this point in time, that they're one of the reasons they're downplaying it so much. One of the reasons they're not covering it whatsoever. One of the reasons that they keep lowballing the estimates of people that are going to attend is in the hopes that everyone will just get discouraged. But this isn't something that this trucker convoy isn't just about truckers and vaccine mandates at this point in time. This is literally about just Canadians in general being completely fed up with their government, not listening to them, not caring about them, and just treating them like second-class citizens in their own country. Remember, the politicians are supposed to work for us, not the other way around. And as I've mentioned a few times now on the show, it literally feels like they're treating us like their chattel, as in we're just an asset to the government, and our individuality, our individual ability to make decisions should just be completely removed, right? And so what I want to highlight here in this next tweet video is essentially what's going on with CBC. So CBC records the opposite direction of the massive crowd in Vaughan Mills.
We're going to do a quick video here showing you CBC, showing a couple of people. Right? Look at this. Their camera, they're setting up to point in this direction. Remember that. Now let's turn around and show what's really happening here. Our news media will not cover this.
So there could be a couple things at play in here, but certainly the optics don't look good for CBC, because as this guy continues throughout the crowd, you know, it's obvious that there's a ton of people and they've set up at the very end of the crowd in order to get their shot. Now, maybe the CBC reporter was concerned that they were going to be harassed or attacked or whatever, because we know the CBC and a lot of the employees there, they love to just run immediately to victimhood. So I wouldn't be surprised if eventually there comes out a counter narrative to this. But certainly we can see there's a lot more people attending this event. And this is just one of many sections of people celebrating and, you know, essentially cheering on all the truckers and all those involved in this trucker freedom convoy. So again, links to everything that I'm sharing with you guys in the video description down below. But let's move on now. So the only thing that the AP had today in regards to what was going on with the trucker convoy was Canada Police fear violence at trucker vaccine protests. Now, we covered this yesterday as well as on Tuesday, so if you guys want to dive deeper into it. But I just quickly wanted to highlight this here because I don't understand how the Ottawa police can be this stupid at this point in time. At the meeting in Ottawa, police disclosed they are preparing for a range of scenarios, including the potential for violent outbreaks. Police say they are planning for the arrival of between 1,000 and 2,000 demonstrators, but say the situation is fluid and changing by the hour. I mean, we literally saw here in Kenora, it was a day ago now, right? Where was over 1,000 vehicles driving through Kenora on their way to Dryden. It seems crazy to me that they're only preparing for 1,000 to 2,000 demonstrators. And if they actually are, you know, playing this up as if it's going to be such a small amount of people showing up, they're doing a disservice to everyone, including every citizen in Ottawa, because the idea of police being present at a protest isn't a bad thing, right? Again, crowd control, just making sure that everything's as orderly as possible. But if they're only preparing as if it's 1,000 or 2,000 people going to be there, I personally think that there's going to be way more people show up in Ottawa, and that's going to create more chaos than necessary. If that's the case, that's on Ottawa police at this point in time, in my opinion. So again, it just blows my mind for them to downplay it. I covered a story on Tuesday where they said they were preparing for 2,000. But now they're scaling it back, despite the fact that we've seen support continuing to gain traction, and we're continuing to see individuals, you know, well-known individuals like Elon Musk, like Joe Rogan, who's got the most watched podcast in the world right now, promoting this and calling out what's going on in Canada. And yet they're thinking that only 1,000 to 2,000 people are going to show up. Kind of building upon this subject matter, this is a opinion piece from the National Post that I really do agree with. Vaccine mandates have broken politics in Canada. The Freedom Convoy proves it. Throughout the pandemic, politicians have been callous about policies that cost regular people their jobs. I think that this is a big reason why we're seeing so much support for truckers. One, because truckers, I think, arguably do embody the everyman, the average person, right? And as well, there's just a lot of truckers out there because we need them for our supply chain. But secondly, it's not just about truckers at this point in time. It's about the average Canadian just being frustrated and fed up of being called stupid, of being called a white nationalist whenever they disagree with our prime minister. So as the article states here, the vaccine mandate on truckers entering Canada is an unnecessary as the risks associated with vaccination are trivial. Yet it is a policy we've collectively allowed to collapse our politics even further into unseriousness, if that is even possible. Further on, it was all of 8 months ago that Justin Trudeau dismissed the idea of mandates on the grounds they are divisive. Throughout the pandemic, politicians have been callous about policies that cost regular people their jobs, strained their relationships, and kept their kids out of school. Progressives supporters of restrictions routinely shout down those advocating for more freedoms as selfish and immoral psychopaths who want to sacrifice the young and old to SARS-CoV-2. Yeah, and we're going to get to that a little bit further on as well, but like it's wild to see how these people are presenting what's going on here in Canada, and the people that are, you know, extremely anti-vaxxer, so people that are very pro vaccinations, again, their willingness to just build a straw man or immediately dismiss their opponents, I think does no one any good. So a recent CBC story about the trucker mandate led with infectious disease experts who were skeptical that the mandate would accomplish what it sets out to do. And direct quote, a vaccine requirement for a select group of people I don't think is highly likely to make a big, huge difference in the short to medium term. The University of Alberta's Dr. Lenora Saxiner said, of course, truck drivers could be spreaders of COVID, but so could everyone else right now. If this is how the public broadcaster is framing Trudeau's vaccine policies, the government truly has lost the plot. Yeah, because this is coming from the CBC. They're about as pro-liberal, as pro-Justin Trudeau as you can get at this point in time. And we've covered it earlier in the week, you know, how we spend $1.5 billion propping them up in addition to the ad revenue they generate. And yet they're continuously losing viewership. And they've only got one show, number 28, in the top 30 shows in Canada right now. Continuing on from the article, the Prime Minister could have simply expressed his support for the right to protest and reiterated why he thinks the mandates are necessary, but he just can't help himself from dismissing the unvaccinated and perhaps even the vaccinated who oppose mandates as unacceptable. Yeah, again, I'm probably never going to love Justin Trudeau at this point in time, but there's ways that he could make me hate him less. And certainly had he taken that approach, I think I would hate him less than I do today. And I suspect that we'd probably even see less momentum behind the trucker mandates or the trucker freedom convoy if he would actually just treat them like real human beings, like they're actually citizens that he's supposed to represent in our government. And then just wanted to quickly update you guys here. The GoFundMe, $6.4 million so far has been raised on GoFundMe for the Freedom Convoy 2022. Again, I forget where we're at now, but I think we're at like over 82,000 donations have occurred so far on this Freedom Convoy. Now, again, my understanding is this could be worldwide donations, so they're not necessarily just Canadian citizens. Let's say, you know, on the conservative end, that 50% of those people at least are Canadians. Well, that's 40,000 people still that have donated to this cause. That's not immaterial, in my opinion, in a country of, 33 million people, particularly when we see all the grassroots support showing up. This is a unique time in Canadian history as far as I'm concerned, and I'm very excited and happy to be able to follow along with it and try and help create general awareness through these shows because, again, the mainstream media is doing us such a disservice at this point in time. And I just wanted to highlight a recent survey that was just published today that, again, I think challenges a lot of the other narratives we're seeing out there. So just high level here, this is from the Maru Public Opinion Poll, and what they found was just over 1/3, 36% of Canadians are hard fast that only truckers who are fully vaccinated should be allowed to cross over the U.S.-Canada border. But they also found only 1 in 3 Canadians, 28%, believe that any unvaccinated trucker delivering food, goods, and other materials to a variety of Canadian destinations should be allowed to cross the border. So when we're constantly hearing about how it's just a fringe minority from our prime minister, and yet we're starting to see data that's really challenging the narrative that he's been pushing out throughout this entire COVID restrictions mandates over the last 2 years. Moving on now, I just want to highlight real quick again, link in the video description down below, but it is interesting. There continues to be more conservative MPs that are speaking out, that are releasing press releases, showing their support for truckers. Now, to be honest, where were these MPs over the last 2 years? That's a very important question to be asking, because at this point in time, I think they simply see the narrative crumbling around them. And so now, like rats scurrying off a ship, they're jumping to, into a safer space. So if we didn't see a massive grassroots protest evolving here, I got a feeling a lot of Conservative Party MPs would literally be sitting on their hands. I'd like to give the benefit of the doubt to Pierre that he probably would have spoken out, but and maybe Scheer and a couple others, but most of the MPs we see speaking out now, especially that are going to show up, they're only reacting because they realize that their base and just a huge amount of Canadians are frustrated and sick of the bullshit, and they don't want the Conservatives to simply be liberal light at this point in time. They actually want them to focus on maybe getting us back to the world, the reality we used to live in just 2 years ago. But it's been a really long 2 years at this point in time. And now this is as well another article from True North. And I just want to highlight this because the same way right now we see the mainstream media cherry picking the language of a handful of extreme individuals that are trying to jump into the Freedom Convoy. There's just as many, if not more, in my opinion, based upon what I see on Twitter, of people that are anti-convoy and that are demonizing anyone that's pro-convoy. So anti-convoy hashtag dehumanizes truckers as vermin, plague rats, and white trash. And again, it's the language of our prime minister that's giving them carte blanche to do so, right? When he says that they're white nationalists, that they're white supremacists, well, then it's really easy for people on Twitter to want to call everyone involved in the convoy as white trash. Despite, if you guys are actually following along, I'm sure you've seen some of the drum circles of First Nations or Indigenous people supporting it. If they're part of the white supremacist movement, I guess I'd be color me a little surprised in that regards. And this is so much bigger than a racial thing. And the fact that so many want to immediately race to identity politics in order to try and demonize their enemy, to me, just simply shows that they realize that they've got no real ground to stand on at this point in time. So they're simply trying to create ad hominem attacks and straw men that they can try and go defeat. Because if they were to actually try and steel man their opponent's side, they would realize, oh shit, I got nothing to stand on. And so one of the hashtags that are circulating is Flu Trucks Clan. And again, this to me is just, it is a catchy phrase, I guess, but at the same time, it's just so insulting and dehumanizing to all the average Canadians that are supporting this. They are sick and tired of the bullshit. So as the article reports, Flu Trucks Clan has become a popular banner for those opposed to the hundreds of thousands of truckers and their supporters who are calling for an end to COVID-19 mandates and the deterioration of rights at the hands of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. True North has found that in their attempts to accuse truckers of violence and racism, opponents of the Ottawa-bound convoy often use threats of violence themselves, as well as words like vermin, plague rats, and dirty white trash, and other abhorrent terms. Twitter users who have leveled these accusations against their fellow Canadians have been egged on by legacy media reports painting the Freedom Convoy as so-called white nationalists, far-right, and domestic terrorists. I 100% agree with this article. And again, I'm not saying that every single person that supports the convoy is going to be perfect. I'm not saying every single person that disagrees with the convoy is evil, but understand that in any large group of human beings, you're always going to have people that tend towards the extremes. And oftentimes it's the most extreme rhetoric that is actually going to break out from the, noise versus signal. So again, for every single mainstream article that's focused on right-wing, domestic terrorists, white nationalists, they should be doing the exact same thing to the anti-convoy people. If you guys want to see some of the crazy shit that they're posting, click the link in the video description down below. I don't even want to bring out the bad juju that is all that shit, so we're going to keep moving on here. But I wanted to highlight this article from the Globe and Mail. A trucker convoy has evolved into something far more dangerous. And this is from Gary Mason, who I think should be embarrassed about this article he wrote. So I'm just going to read the first two paragraphs and then we'll move on. But there's likely a faction of those involved in the trucker convoy now making its way to the Capitol who believe they are part of a legitimate protest. There is likely a faction? Let that sink in, right? The hubris of the mainstream corporate press media at this point in time is that they can just rewrite what's actually happening. To be like, there is likely a faction. words matter. And to start off your entire essay or your entire article this way, it's just so disingenuous. When you've got a movement of thousands of people, potentially hundreds of thousands of people at this point in time, there is absolutely going to be a faction that believes this is a legitimate protest. And again, Gary, you should absolutely be embarrassed. But as well-meaning as some of these people may be, again, but as well-meaning as some of these people may be, he won't even, he won't even give the benefit of the doubt that at least some of them are good people with good intentions. Again, it's our politicians, it's Justin Trudeau that's essentially giving these people carte blanche to paint anyone that disagrees with them as other than, right? As dehumans. But as well-meaning as some of these people may be, it's now clear that this demonstration has been hijacked by a fringe element that sounds an awful lot like freedom fighters and patriots who gathered at the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021, and ended up storming the premises in a poorly organized coup d'etat. One, that's complete bullshit that it was a coup d'etat that occurred on January 6th, but we'll leave that for another day in another video. But this honestly frustrates me that we're at this point in time. And if something doesn't change soon, I think we're going to find ourselves very much like the United States does in an irreconcilable position. Like, if you're going to immediately assume that I'm evil, that I'm a white supremacist simply because I disagree with you, where does that leave me to go? I either have to heel and obey and simply parrot whatever you say and whatever the corporate media, corporate press says, or completely agree with Justin Trudeau. Otherwise, what? Like, the fact that you can't even grant the benefit of the doubt to at least a portion of the individuals participating in this says everything, in my opinion, about where we are in this point in time. And again, this is from the Globe and Mail, but don't worry, guys, you don't need a subscription to this trash rag. I use the 12foot.io, which allows you to jump over any paywall so you can still read it without having to financially support these assholes. And this is from National Observer. Again, 12foot.io, because fuck them. Anti-vaxxer truck convoy signals insidious spread of Trumpism in Canada. And again, it's impossible that Canadians might actually just like freedom. It's impossible that Canadians might actually just want individual bodily autonomy and the ability to make their own medical decisions. They have to be, QAnon. They have to be Trump supporters. They have to be white nationalists. The near insurrection of January 6, 2021, when thousands of pro-Trump supporters swarmed the U.S. Capitol and left at least 7 people dead. Again, go and actually fact check that, because on the day of the event, only one lady died, and she was shot by Capitol Police. So again, they attribute a lot of other deaths that occurred after the fact that weren't direct causes from it. In fact, I'm pretty sure if you dive deep into it, you'll find that one of the Capitol Police that died a few days later of like a heart condition. I believe it was a heart attack. Should have been a wake-up call for anyone who cares about the state of their own democracy. But if the Conservative Party of Canada's recent behavior is any indication, it's more than happy to keep hitting the snooze button and continue playing to the base instincts of an increasingly unhinged fringe movement. This is insane at this point in time. If you actually live in this world, and who was this written by again? Max Fawcett. If you live in this reality, bro, understand that you and I literally coexist on 2 different planes of existence. Like, it is wild to think that you want to frame this, the Conservative Party of Canada as focusing on these fringe elements. Because one, we literally just played Aaron O'Toole dancing around avoiding any sort of support for the truckers because he's so scared of what you, the corporate press, are going to say about him. Again, if I want to put on my tinfoil hat, I might bring up all the crazy subsidies that everyone in legacy media and the corporate press and mainstream media has received over these last few years, and particularly CBC, but let's just keep moving on. So Toronto Star, time to call out nasty, hate-filled anti-vaxxers. And again, there's just this dehumanization of the other side. And it's also kind of cute how all the corporate press is focused on one dude that dressed up as the Grim Reaper in their photos, rather than showing, as we showed in various other video clips today and on Wednesday and on Tuesday, thousands of normal-looking average Canadians that are patriots that do believe in individual freedom and bodily autonomy. And it just, I mean, So again, I'm just going to read the first couple sentences here. You guys can go check it out for yourself. But let's be blunt. Some hardcore anti-vaxxers are among the most abusive, hateful, and obnoxious people in Canada these days. That stark statement may surprise many oh-so-polite Canadians who are still hesitant about getting a COVID vaccine shot. But they likely are also completely unaware of the obscenity-laced messages hurled by anti-vaxxers on a daily basis at journalists, politicians, healthcare workers, and others who support vaccines and vaccine mandates. So first things first, again, maybe it's true, maybe it's not that constantly politicians and mainstream corporate press is having abuse hurled at them. But let's think about why people might be angry and frustrated. Is it because constantly you rewrite history and you don't call out Justin Trudeau when 8 months ago he dismissed the idea of vaccine mandates as being divisive and not useful? And then fast forward 8 months later and we've got them everywhere? Is it the fact that the moment anyone disagrees with you, you immediately label them an anti-vaxxer? Is it the moment that anyone questions whether children should actually receive COVID vaccinations because they're not at risk and because the vaccinations don't stop spread, that you immediately label them as anti-vaxxers? Yeah, I got a feeling that a lot of the hate that you've received, you were a participant in creating it by not being balanced, by not actually looking at what's going on. These same reporters are the ones that essentially called us conspiracy theorists when we dared question whether the Wuhan lab of virology that was literally working on similar sort of strains might have been involved in the creation of COVID-19. And now, essentially, at this point in time, everyone's kind of accepted it, but apparently we've just decided to shrug and not care, not hold Eco Alliance or the Wuhan virology lab or the Chinese government, which consistently lied to us throughout this. Remember, they're also saying that Omicron came to China via letter that was sent from Canada. It's the constant playing of politics. It's the constant dehumanization of your enemies that's making so many of us frustrated. I don't consider myself an anti-vaxxer, and yet I've got no doubt that every single reporter we've covered here today would label me as such. Moving on, let's get into a couple blue pill stories. So that's it for the trucker updates. I hope you guys got value from that section. Again, I'm trying to stay balanced, but while I'm extremely encouraged by what I see going on with the Freedom Convoy, it frustrates me to no end to see those true patriots, not in a Trumpism sort of or QAnon patriot way, but in just like actually true red-blooded Canadians being painted in such an ugly fashion by the press, which is actually supposed to be a check and balance against politicians rather than simply just a propaganda machine for the politicians. There was a time, at least, when I believed the press was an actual check and balance. At this point in time, I don't live in that reality anymore, I guess. Anyways, let's move on. We're just going to blow through these ones. But National Post, blue pill story, why the double vaccinated in some places are testing positive for COVID more often than the unvaccinated. Again, I don't want to jump to conclusions here, and I think there's a good point made here. In essence, they suggest that people who are vaccinated are more likely to seek a PCR test for employment and other reasons, and more apt to be exposed to COVID, skewing the statistics as Omicron variant spreads rapidly. The first half of that, I believe. Because I believe the people that are double vaxxed, the people that are triple vaxxed, the people that are constantly, double masked and keeping 6 feet apart, they've been brainwashed by politicians and the corporate press to be so scared that I bet they're testing themselves every 5 seconds. We already know how effective those tests are in regards to false positives, which we've covered, I think, probably 2 weeks ago in a story. But anyways, just wanted to highlight that quick. Moving on, Toronto Star. Quick reminder, guys, if you've got your COVID passport, coming Monday here in Ontario, restaurants, cinemas, bars, and gyms will go to half capacity. Now, of course, you won't be able to do dangerous things like eat popcorn in the movie theater, and you'll have to have your vaccine passport to get in. And you're going to want to do that soon before they change the definition and require that you actually have 3 shots instead of 2. Because, again, we know the sort of Ferris wheel that this all is, but again, link to all these stories in the video description down below. One last blue pill story I want to bring up, and this could have easily been a story. This is from Blacklock's reporter. They are one of the few press outlets that I encourage you guys to go support. I think that they do a lot of important reporting, and they actually do serve as a check and balance to the politicians in power. And so this is just interesting because I'm wondering soon if I get to, climb up the hierarchy of victimhood because white men earn less, report shows. Visible minorities earn as much as a tenth more than white men. Statistics Canada said yesterday, minorities were also likelier to live in big cities, achieve university degrees, and remain single without children. And essentially goes on to kind of break down the different statistics and how that works out. But just want to highlight this one other piece here. White men were also less likely to have a university degree. When considering educational attainment, more than 60% of Korean and Chinese men and more than 40% of Arab, West Asian, Japanese, and South Asian men had a university degree compared with 24% of white men, wrote analysts. Similarly, more than 70% of Korean and Chinese women and around 60% of Japanese, South Asian women had a university degree compared with 38% of white women. So I don't bring this up because I actually want to be able to use victimhood. I don't believe in equity oriented politics and identity politics in particular. I think it does a disservice to everyone, but it's just going to be interesting to see as this narrative evolves, are we going to end up having to change the political corrective or the politically correct narratives? Because it seems like actually, those evil white nationalist truckers aren't actually making more money than a lot of visible minorities. And again, I just kind of want to bring it up because I found it kind of funny. But moving on to a red pill story of the day and talking about kids again and vaccines. And remember, essentially, if you even question the narrative, your prime minister and all the mainstream corporate press will paint you as an anti-vaxxer. But Fauci suggests there will be a 3-dose vaccine regime for children under 4 years old. Again, I'll leave you guys to go and read the entire article, but switching gears, Sweden refuses to recommend COVID vaccine for children between the ages of 5 and 12. And they're not even talking about giving it to children under the age of 5 right now. So the Swedish government decided against recommending COVID vaccinations for children between the ages of 5 and 12, citing studies that show young people have a significantly lower chance of severe illness than older citizens and those with comorbidities. Direct quote here, with the knowledge we have today, with a low risk for serious disease for kids, we don't see any clear benefit with vaccinating them, said health agency official Britta Bjorholm told a news conference. Sweden registered more than 40,000 new cases on January 26, one of the highest daily numbers during the pandemic, despite limited testing. While the fourth wave has seen daily infection records shattered, the healthcare is not under the same strain as during previous waves. Really interesting how here in Canada, we couldn't prepare for these new all-time highs of cases, and yet Sweden just doing their thing, not going crazy, allowing people to make individual decisions and bodily autonomy, medical decisions for themselves. It's interesting. Kind of wish that we would have taken the Sweden approach all along here, not going to lie. And then moving on, again, I said we're going to be real fast today with the stories. Let's hit a couple black pill stories. So this is from Louder with Crowder. Gym owner sentenced over crime of removing doors so government couldn't lock down his gym. And this is Ian Smith. If you guys aren't following him on social media, I'll encourage you now to go give him a follow. But we're going to keep rolling here because we've already spent a lot of time on this. So this is from the Counter Signal. Again, I really appreciate everything Kian is doing here. So breaking, police closed parts of Highway 17 ahead of Convoy. So the same day that Trudeau announced he was going into hiding, Ontario police shut down parts of Highway 17, part of the Trans-Canada Highway, ahead of the trucker convoy making its way to Ottawa. According to emerging news reports, police have taken the initiative to close Highway 17 from Batchewana Bay to White River due to poor weather conditions, despite those on the road reporting clear driving conditions. So I don't have all the facts here. I haven't been able to corroborate this with any other sources. So maybe the weather is terrible, maybe it's not, but it certainly seems interesting to have this occur. This is going to end up adding, I believe, 6 to 12 hours to the commute of all these protesters. I don't believe it's going to stop any of the Freedom Trucker Convoy coming from out west. They've came this far already. I imagine they're committed to it. And again, I appreciate their commitment to standing up and fighting for our freedoms. Now, moving on, And this almost could have been a clown pill or maybe even a white pill story, but I classified it as a black pill. Ontario's top doctor, and this is from today, says it's time to learn to live with COVID-19. Yeah, I feel like a lot of us have been saying this for almost 20 months now. Ontario's top doctor says it's time to learn to live with COVID-19 as he anticipates the province is in for a much better spring. We have let our lives be controlled for the last 2 years in a significant amount of fear, and now we are going to have to change some of that thinking, Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Kieran Moore, said Thursday. More credited COVID-19 vaccines, especially third doses, and new antiviral medications as the reason why Ontario needs to shift to a more balanced response to the pandemic. And yet we keep hearing about all-time highs of cases, about how our hospitals are overbearing and overtaxed by the sick. At this point in time, I think this is one, them just trying to give us a false hope. And two, this is them kind of preparing or prepping for a hard pivot if we continue to see more and more European and other countries open up, because I think they're just trying to hedge their bets. But I did want to highlight this. This is a direct quote from him. I think we have to start to understand we have to learn to live with this virus, Moore said. So again, they can't point to any science that actually dictates why the narrative's changing now. It's simply because I think they realize the politics is no longer on their side and the corporate press will only carry their water for so long. But another quote from him, when we reach that low endemic rate, that's when we review all public health measures in play. Moore said no one wants them to them a minute longer than they have to be. This is complete fucking bullshit. A lot of these politicians and health officials, I think they fucking love what's going on right now. And I forgot to highlight this, but Moore said that the trend is expected to continue in March, and by April, we will be hitting to that low rate of activity in the community. So, hey, Ontario, if nothing changes, you may be allowed to just live with COVID the way, Sweden's been living with COVID throughout the last 2 years by April. Yeah, this doesn't give me a lot of hope, but there you go. That's the black pill story for the day. Clown pill story for the day. I wasn't in much of a good mood putting together these stories, so I just decided I'd grab this article from National Post. Seeking Dr. Dolittle, a private 450 animal zoo for sale. So, hey guys, let's just crowdfund and buy a zoo. Maybe we can become the new Tiger Kings. And then moving on, let's cover a white pill story, a couple quick white pill stories. So this one I actually really did get a laugh out of, and it could have probably been a clown pill. But did you guys see the Ron DeSantis released his scorching new ad guaranteed to cause another Fauci meltdown? So I can't wait to hear how Fauci's going to play the victim on this, but I absolutely adore this video. And the reason I consider it a white pill at this point in time is just anyone that's willing to call out Fauci on this bullshit. That gives me hope that we're going to continue to see more and more people stand up and speak out. And throughout this, Ron DeSantis has been one of the leaders in the U.S. that's really been fighting for individual freedoms.
Some major flip-flopping. People should not be walking around with masks. Masks work. Fully vaccinated, you are protected, and you do not need to wear a mask. If you are vaccinated, you should still wear a mask.
You really better be very careful before you bring the children back.
The default position should be to try as best as possible to keep the children in school. Right now, at this moment, there is no need to change anything that you're doing on a day-by-day basis. I would like to see a dramatic diminution of the personal interaction that we see. So let me clarify that, because there was a little bit of a misunderstanding.
So just absolutely love that. I don't know if these are real flip-flops or not, but if they are, I'm pretty sure I'm going to need to get myself a pair. Probably get 2 pairs, because you're going to want to wear one and then keep one as a memorabilia, because I just got a feeling that, unfortunately, Fauci's going to be around for a lot longer, despite the fact that, if you go back and look into his history about AIDS and everything going on during the AIDS situation in the 80s and 90s, he seemed to get everything consistently wrong and be off the mark. Remember how he got us all scared in the 80s to even share a bowl of Cheerios because you might get AIDS? Yeah. that's the guy that we essentially are allowing run the world at this point in time. It's absolutely wild. Continuing on to a couple other, at least sort of white pill stories. So this is from MSN and CNBC. Back to reality at last. COVID rules are being dropped in Europe despite high Omicron spread. So I believe it was Denmark recently came out saying they were going to start getting rid of all their rules. The Netherlands came out easing their restrictions. We've seen England come out. Germany seems to be holding steadfast on the crazy COVID lockdowns and mandates wagon, but I'm hoping that we continue to see a deterioration of the narrative in Europe and that eventually spreads across the Atlantic into Canada as well. And I also hope we continue to see more states like Florida, like Texas, stand up to Fauci and what's going on in the US in the hopes that, again, that slowly spreads its way into Canada. But if not, hopefully the truckers and the Freedom Convoy can help drive some common sense into Canada's politicians and corporate media. And so that's it for the white pill story of the day. I'll leave you with the meme of the day. So I found this one pretty funny. So Anon is so cute. Why won't he come out of his room and talk to us? I don't know. He's been talking about something called the Great Reset and how he won't eat the bugs. Yeah, I hear you on this one, Anon. I'm right there with you. I've got no interest in eating the bugs, and I'd actually like to continue to own things, and that will make me happy rather than owning nothing and being happy as the World Economic Forum would prefer you be. If you guys haven't been following along with the World Economic Forum, go check yesterday's video where essentially I broke down for you how a large portion of the Canadian cabinet seems to be, literally this is their words from Klaus Schwab, he has penetrated 50% of Canada's current cabinet in regards to World Economic Forum and the Davos cruise agenda. So that's it for today's Maple Pill. If you guys enjoyed this video, if you like what I'm doing, please subscribe and share on social media, because we both know the social technocracy is going to do us no favors with the algorithms. Smash the like button, all that good stuff. And before we wrap up, I'm going to quickly jump over to the chat. And I appreciate all of you that are always engaging with what's going on. So we've got Peter, as always. Appreciate it, Peter. We've got Benjamin. Elon Musk said Canada truckers rule. Yeah, absolutely. That was nice to see. Madden says O'Toole is a liberal under a conservative banner. Absolutely. Like, it's why even get outbid at this point in time? Can't you just play a recording of Justin Trudeau, O'Toole, and save yourself the hassle? Benjamin said, what a coward. Sure, he found an excuse to avoid a discussion with the convoy and freedom fighters' true leader. Yeah, and again, as we quoted in that early article, honestly, if Trudeau came out and was like, hey, I respect your right to protest, I disagree with your position, I believe mandates are still important, I could at least find a little bit of respect for that. Again, I'm never going to love the guy, but it'd be much easier to respect him if he mildly respected us rather than demonize us at every chance he gets. David says, O'Toole is just that, O'Toole. He absolutely lives up to his name on a daily basis. And I don't like, at this point in time, I just assume that the Conservative Party of Canada are masochists, and that's why they continue to leave him in as a leader, because otherwise it makes literally no sense to me. Bite Hunter says, I think Trudeau is receiving money from either pharmaceutical companies or from the government, who may be pushing through the UN's plan, Agenda 2030, to depopulate the earth by wars and vaccinations. Yeah, we'll leave that rabbit hole for another day, but certainly those of you that want to understand more, I encourage you to look into things like the World Economic Forum, to the International Monetary Fund, to the UN's Agenda 2030, and all that craziness. You live in a much crazier world than you likely realize. We all do, in fact. He will test positive on Monday, said David Moore. I assume that's Trudeau in regards to COVID-19. I wouldn't be surprised, especially if I especially think that they'll come out with a positive test if it ends up that the truckers end up hanging around in Ottawa for a while. I wouldn't be shocked to learn that he'll be sick throughout their entire protest. And again, you know, you look back to it and you think like World War I, you know, Canadians fighting in the trenches, or World War II, storming the beaches of Juno. And then you look at Trudeau, who tests negative, but is going to self-isolate for 5 days and work from home and miss the first day of Parliament reopening, as well as miss what potentially could be the biggest protest in Canadian history. Yeah, that's who leads us today. That's literally who leads us. So Frank says, if the vaccines work, why does Trudeau need to isolate? I think at this point in time, I don't want to get banned off of YouTube. I'll just leave it. At this point in time, I think we all know how effective those vaccines are. Pastafarian 2, it feels so special to be in a small live group. The Citadel, appreciate it, Pastafarian. And yeah, please, say a prayer to the big spaghetti monster in the sky for all those Canadian truckers, because they need support, because clearly corporate press and politicians are going to do very little. Winston Pipe says, maybe he is hiding because the KS video just came out about him. I'm not sure what the KS video is. You guys let me know. And if you guys have any stories for me to cover, reminder, there's a link to the Problems or Profits Discord in the video description down below. There's a channel there called Maple Pill. You guys can share all your thoughts on the show, as well as any story suggestions you'd like to see me cover in the future. I really do appreciate the fact that we're able to have a two-way conversation, unlike the CBC, who turns off comments, despite the fact we pay them $1.5 billion in taxpayer funding every year, and they've got the audacity to turn off the comment section, right? Let that sink in. Nicole says, living in the States and hearing this, we have literally the same types of situations happening, lies, deceits, divisive tactics from the much disliked governor. Glad to have found this channel, or from the governor. Glad to have found this channel. Cheers. Appreciate it, Nicole. King Dupe 101. Jason Kenney in Alberta is running away, will not support us. He needs to go. Any UCP not showing support needs to hit the curb. Yeah, he's honestly at this point in time, I think it's Mo from Saskatchewan that arguably has he's got a hint of a backbone. I'll say at this point in time, every other premier seems like they're completely lacking any sort of spine, any even hint of a spine. Mark says, this is a cause where most people should easily be able to understand and support. Absolutely. And I suspect that even more people would support the Freedom Convoy if it wasn't for the corporate press running, defense and essentially trying to cover ass for Justin Trudeau. Jen in Small Spaces, anyone have live streams for the convoys arriving in Sault Ste. Marie or Kingston? Well, it sounds like depending upon whether Highway 17 is still closed, they won't actually be able to get to Sault Ste. Marie or go through North Bay. So you're going to want to double check that. One of the best ways to stay informed with what's going on is the Zello channel. So if you guys want to figure out how to get on Zello, if you go back to my Tuesday video, I break it down for you how you can join. As well, there's a very popular Telegram channel. Again, link on Tuesday's video to all that good stuff. RM Field, all these Main Street media outlets are paid shills and state-owned media, pigs at the trough for bailout money. Sadly, you are correct. JJ Clem, now we know how all the American patriots have been feeling for the last several years. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Being gaslit is never fun. Logan, laugh out loud, dangerous things like eat popcorn in the theater. Yeah, literally though, that's the reality we live in, where they'll open up a cinema at 50% capacity, but they won't dare allow you to eat popcorn or consume food there. That's literally, and like they've got the potential that at any point in time the COVID police could break in and ask you for your papers while watching that cinema. Darren says, listening to the truckers, road might be open for them. Okay, well, that'd be fantastic. Like I said, I couldn't confirm the counter signal article there, so appreciate the update. S. Pariah, America first, Israel last. Okay. The right needs to get groped and realized the severity of the, okay. Canada, where they punish their citizens for having rights. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Anti-vegan nonsense. Quebec should separate. We don't need a fascist state in Canada. I agree. At this point in time, you look back on 1996 and you're like, maybe we should have let Quebec and the French just go do their own thing. And then maybe we could have let Trudeau go be prime minister of that Quebec, rather than, hijacking all of Canada and deciding that we don't like having individual rights here. Chuck Hudlum says, truckers are Canada's opposition party. Ask Trudeau if you can find him. He has 3 pinholes in his arm. Oh, fool, resign. Yeah, at this point in time, I wouldn't be surprised if we eventually see some sort of political party or political movement emerge from this freedom convoy. Because, again, the CPC are not doing it. But this also does represent great opportunity for Max and the PPC to stand up and kind of separate themselves even further from all the spineless politicians that are currently in Canadian politics. Anti-vegan, I think Trudeau should get one more shot, but okay, we're not going to read that or that'll probably get me kicked off. He's a pussy. Don't disagree. The vaccines work. Just ask all those people that have died from COVID while quintupled vaccinated. O'Toole is just a liberal shill brought in to divide the PC into the PPC, dividing their opposition. Yeah, it's. I understand how people could come to that conclusion at this point in time because he certainly seems to be not even doing his own party any favors. Craig says, we have had enough of the racist bias attitude of the CBC. Pull the plug and turn the lights out on them. They are not a news media platform. I agree. We don't need a propaganda wing of the government at this point in time because all the corporate press is already doing it for them anyways. So at least let's reduce the amount of taxes that we have to pay, or at least the amount of taxes that go to pay the CBC. And I think the biggest question is, if the CBC didn't exist today, would we need it? And it's a resounding no. It's a resounding no as far as I'm concerned. Anyways, I appreciate you guys hanging out with me. I know we went a little long on this episode, but again, I love the fact that we're able to have a two-way conversation and how much you guys share in the chats. And again, I really appreciate those of you that are sharing these videos on social media because it's the only way anyone's going to hear about this. And finally, a reminder, if you want to join a like-minded community of individuals, link to the Problems or Profits Discord in the video description down below. We'll see you guys tomorrow with what I assume will probably be a normal episode of the Maple Pill. But again, I wouldn't be surprised if we end up covering a lot of what's going on with the trucker convoy because it feels so important right now in this day, in this moment, particularly when we see the corporate press continuing to avoid the subject matter. So I appreciate you guys being informed, those of you that are doing your own research. And again, don't let your research stop with just this show. Links to everything in the video description down below. Go make your own decision. Despite the fact that corporate press essentially tells you what you should think, I'm just asking you to think. Thanks, guys, and we'll see you tomorrow.